Friends, it's good to be with you today. I'm Pastor Jonathan. I hope you had a good Labor Day weekend this past week, full of cookouts and afternoon naps, as like you do. We did around my household what my kids always want to do whenever there's a free moment. We went to Target. My kids love it. Everybody has their section at Target. There's the toy section, the electronic section, the Pokemon section. My section is the global foods aisle, right, Hudson? Yes, there's so many sauces and so little time. Target is like this whole store that's built to make us think that we need something that we don't yet have. Just think of how tasty my tacos could be with just one more sauce, right? So Labor Day was full of the hardest work of all for me, learning to be content with what I have. It's that way for all of us, right? Our world and our culture is literally designed. We have apps that we open on our phone that are built to serve us a constant feed of everyone else's vacation photos. It's algorithms to engage us or enrage us or to show us everything that we don't have and what life could be like if we just had one more sauce. As Brene Brown puts it perfectly, comparison says, be like everyone else, but better. That, friends, is a race without a finish line, and it's exhausting. But what our souls really long for isn't just a finish line. It's to feel finished, settled, content. Wherever we are, in whatever circumstances, to be ourselves there. We're all searching for that kind of contentment and peace, aren't we? That sustainable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances or a cart full of stuff. The ability to be where we are, fully present, fully ourselves, and to be able to say, it is well with our soul, even as the sea billows roll. We see that universal longing throughout Scripture, and we see it in Paul's letter to the Philippian community. We've been looking at this the past few weeks, and we've seen him engage with deep needs and share big ideas. But today, we see Paul make maybe the biggest claim of all about contentment and peace. Paul's writing, of course, from a Roman prison cell, a difficult circumstance amidst a difficult world. But he says that he has found, get this, the secret of contentment. Spoiler alert, it's not essential oils or anything you can find at Target. It's something much deeper and completely countercultural, but we'll get to that. We listened this morning and prayed along together with these beautiful Celtic words. What I have is enough. What I receive is gift. What I give is love. And those ancient Celtic seekers understood that contentment comes not from having more, but from recognizing that what we already possess is a gift. Contentment isn't about having perfect circumstances, but for the Celtics, it was about recognizing God's presence in every circumstance. And they discovered what Paul would learn in prison, that contentment isn't a destination you arrive to. It is a posture, a perspective that can transform wherever you are into a place where you know God is with you. And so Paul begins to unveil this secret in Philippians chapter 4. And just listen along to this, beginning in verse 11. I've learned to be content with whatever I have. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well-fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yes, this section is where that verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, is found. You may have heard that before. It's a beautiful verse, but it's also one of those great pithy Pinterest poster proverbs, right, that we paint on gym walls and motivational memes. The great Tim Tebow would put it on his eye black before football games. I can do all things except throw a spiral, probably, right? But Paul isn't writing this as an ancient life coach with a bestseller called From Prison to Prosperity. No. He is writing from actual prison in a time of great need. And he's writing about sustainability for the long work of building the world that God dreams. And this verse, and his secret of where contentment can be found, was as countercultural in Paul's day as it is in ours. See, the Greek word that Paul uses for contentment is from Stoic philosophy. It is autarkes. It means self-sufficient, content. And this was a loaded word borrowed directly from the dominant philosophy of the day. For Stoics, autarkes, this idea of self-sufficiency and contentment, this represented the highest human ideal. Complete self-sufficiency would render you emotionally immune to external circumstances. And for Stoics, the perfect sage was like an impenetrable fortress, needing nothing and no one. If your fishing boat sprang a hole and sank, your proper Stoic response would be, well, the only thing certain in life is change. Pass the olives, please. That was what it looked like to be a great Stoic. If you just achieved the right level of philosophical detachment, you could be content, like ancient emotional Teflon, right? Nothing sticks. But Paul makes his readers do a double take by using this word. He takes this revered term and completely redefines it. When Paul says he's learned to be autarkes, content, he immediately explains that this self-sufficient, rugged independence comes through complete dependence on the empowering of God. All things through Christ. Self-sufficiency found through God's all-sufficient love. Paul's saying to the Stoic culture, do you want real self-sufficiency? Well, you won't find it by mustering up your own strength or building emotional walls. You'll find it instead by rooting yourself so deeply in God's inexhaustible love that you can weather any storm. Not because you don't feel the wind, but because you're anchored to something unshakable. Paul's version of contentment isn't invulnerability. It's resilient sustainability. Where the Stoics promoted emotional detachment, Paul promotes deeper engagement. Where they said, don't let anything affect you, Paul says, things happen that affect us, but know through it all that you're held by something stronger than whatever it is that you're facing. And so for Paul, contentment isn't just pretending. It's not toxic positivity where we aggressively and cheerfully insist that everything's fine when clearly it's not. Paul's authentically honest about his struggles along the way. Nor is it this self-centered comfort, the I've got mine and so I'm good attitude. Paul's whole letter is about partnership and being in this together and caring for each other even when it costs us something. And it's certainly not passive resignation that accepts injustice. Paul spent his whole ministry challenging oppression and building communities that made authorities so uncomfortable that they kept throwing him in jail. So what is Paul's secrets? Listen to the Greek that I've translated in my own maybe a little bit more literal translation. This comes from Jonathan's literal translation. I'll send you a copy if you're interested. It says, I have the power to face all these things in union with the one who continually empowers me. Paul's discovered that the secret of drawing from a well that never runs dry is rooting ourselves in union with God's inexhaustible love, aligning our work with God's work. And when we do, we don't have to access We have access to strength that doesn't depend on our own ability to muster it up, or doesn't depend on our caffeine intake, or even whether Mercury is in retrograde. It doesn't depend on those things because it doesn't flow from circumstances. It grows from the Spirit and the spiritual resilience that says, I don't need to control the outcome. I don't need immediate results. I don't even need the stars to align. I can keep doing the right thing because I'm sustained by love and life itself. And that realization is the solid ground that helps us find peace in every season. Recently, I've come across social researcher Mel Robbins' book, The Let Them Theory. You may have come across this yourself. I found it via Instagram. And so, yes, good things do happen there as well, too. It's not all vacation photos. The book is a kind of modern recasting of the Serenity Prayer in so many ways. Serenity in knowing what we can change and what we cannot. And she writes this. She says, you can't control how other adults behave. And stressing about it diminishes your power. Let them, she says, let them judge. Let them react. Let them doubt you. Instead of wasting your time worrying about them, start living your life in a way that makes you proud of yourself. Just let them. And then you get to choose what you do next. Great freedom comes when we realize we cannot control other people's responses, but we can control our own. There's power in let them, but the real empowerment is found in the next phrase, when we say, let them, yes, and therefore let me. Paul discovered this in prison. He couldn't control the Roman political circumstances. He couldn't control his environment. He couldn't even control his future. But he could control his response, his faithfulness, his perspective. He could let Romans be Romans while he remained rooted in something deeper. This wasn't resignation, it's liberation from the exhausting work of trying to manage other people's choices, and instead allowing us to choose to be empowered by the all-sufficient love of God that allows us to say, let them, sure. But as for me and my house, let us be different. Let them, but as Paul writes elsewhere, let us not grow weary in doing what is right. For we will reap a harvest. We will reap at harvest time if we do not give up. Let us keep doing the next right thing. Continually empowered by the deepest forces in the universe, the God who is with us, the love that wins. So keep loving, keep serving, keep standing up and speaking up, keep showing up, keep going. God is with you. And if you need to rest, God is with you in that too. But know this, God's love wins, and there will be a harvest. So let us. The us part for Paul and for each of us is deeply important. Because for Paul, contentment isn't individualistic like our cultural view sometimes might be. He's writing this thank you letter to the community in Philippi because they have been supporting him and been with him in his hard times. They sent him a care package in the form of food and money and a friend to come be with him and sit with him in prison. Paul has learned contentment, not just in isolation, but in community. His self-sufficiency is rooted in God's all-sufficiency and experienced through the support of people who refuse to let him face his struggles alone, just as he did for them. So often we experience God's care through the care of others, don't we? We're called to be that care for each other as well. I'm so proud of the way that this church does this in so many ways. One of those ways is led by our care coordinator, Judy Swope, and her incredible teams who deliver real and figurative care packages of love that help us all know that God is with us. Usually when I reach out to someone on the phone or get to visit with them, they've already been reached out to, prayed for, visited 6 times by people from this church, and I'm grateful for that. We say, let the circumstances of this tumultuous life do what it will, but let us care for each other. That interdependence challenges our modern assumptions of contentment as an individual achievement, something we're supposed to forge and figure out from the right spiritual practices. But for Paul, contentment is also profoundly communal. He can be content in prison partly because he knows that he is not forgotten by God or by the community around him. And so in our individual lives and in our community, how can we cultivate that sustaining contentment? The first way is this: notice what you already have. Paul writes from prison, but he sees abundance everywhere. Not because his circumstances are great, but because his perspective has been transformed. As the great Henry Nouwen writes, gratitude makes everything we have enough. Gratitude is recognizing good among us. It's also recognizing God with us. And it echoes in our prayer that we prayed today. What I have is enough. What I receive is a gift. Practicing gratitude in our lives is a way of practicing that prayer in our real lives. It doesn't mean that it transforms our circumstances into something good. There are things that happen to us that are not good. But it helps us see that our good God is with us, even in the worst circumstances. And that is where the empowerment that is the secret of contentment is found. And we can learn to cultivate it in another way as well, by opening our hands, not closing them. In hard times, we often close our hands tightly in self-protection. That's understandable. But when we choose to open our hands, even in difficult times, we see that our lives are marked by abundance, not scarcity. And sometimes opening our hands or our lives to share is the best way to remember that. The Philippian community's leader was imprisoned. Persecution was at hand. But rather than circling the wagons, they loaded them up and sent them out to share. For them and for us, as we practice generosity, we discover in that we have more than we thought. Because when we share our time and our resources and our attention with others, we discover that we have reserves that we didn't know existed. Because we're loving and living from the power that is abundant, that is all sufficient, and that empowers us in all things. Nothing connects us more deeply with the truth that God is with us than serving or sharing generously. And learning to trust that God is with us is where contentment begins to be found. That's why when Arapaho steps out to serve or to advocate in our city, it can feel so life-giving because we're not depleting resources as we share them. We're discovering new depths of community and purpose. Practicing this kind of generosity creates contentment along the way and helps us live into that prayer that what we share builds hope. It builds it not just in those that we share with, it builds it in us as well. If you're struggling, try helping someone else. If you're worried, reach out to a friend to comfort them. Because in this really powerful way, serving and sharing helps us lift our eyes from our own circumstances to see the abundant help that we all have, us included. And as we've learned from Philippians. If you happen to find yourself in an ancient Roman jail, try writing an encouraging letter to your friends. Who knows, who might read it one day, right? As we conclude our Philippians journey, these themes and these threads that we've explored weave together. Partnership with people like Lydia showed us strength in each other. Growing forward like monarchs on a journey taught us to lean into God's future. And humility revealed the mind of Christ that puts love above ego. But contentment is the thread that weaves through them all and makes that work sustainable. We can be partners because we're sharing abundant love, not competing for scarce resources. We can keep growing because we're empowered by something inexhaustible. And we can practice humility because we need only be faithful in our next step, not heroes that complete the whole mission. And we can find contentment in union with God's empowering love in every season. That contentment doesn't make us complacent. It makes us sustainable. Not passive, but persistent. Not naive about injustice, but grounded in hope that is stronger than any opposition. We are unfinished and united. Still becoming, still growing, still learning, but we're not alone. We are sustained by the one who began a good work in us and promises to complete it. And we're sustained by each other as partners in love's work for the long work of building the future that God dreams. And we're sustained most of all by this truth, that in all things, in prayer and protest and celebration and struggle, in victory and the very days where we are waiting, we're sustained by this truth. We can do all things in union with the one who continually strengthens us. That's Paul's secrets, and it's ours too. And it's how we stay in this beautiful work of God's love for the long haul, unfinished and united, and in union with the God who is with us always together. Thanks be to God for this hope, for this truth, and for the secret of God's love that is with us always. Amen.